In 1940, German Luftwaffe pilots dominated European skies with confidence and superior numbers. They had swept through Poland in weeks, crushed France in months, and now turned their sights on Britain. Their Messerschmitt 109 fighters were considered the finest in the world, and their pilots were veterans of multiple campaigns. But there was one RAF pilot they consistently underestimated, a Spitfire ace who defied every limitation placed before him. His name was Douglas Bader, and he had lost both his legs 9 years before the war even began. This is the story of how a man deemed permanently grounded became one of Britain's most aggressive and successful fighter pilots, credited with 22 confirmed aerial victories and multiple probables. The Luftwaffe pilots who faced him in combat had no idea that the fearless ace, maneuvering his Spitfire with deadly precision through the skies over England and France, was flying without legs, using only prosthetics, steel determination, and a refusal to accept the word impossible. Douglas Robert Stewart Bader was born on February 21, 1910, in St John's Wood, London, England. His father, Frederick Bader, was a civil engineer who had served in India. His mother, Jessie, raised Douglas and his siblings after Frederick died of wounds sustained during World War I, when Douglas was just 11 years old. Young Douglas was athletic, competitive, and drawn to physical challenges. He excelled at rugby and cricket at St Edward's School in Oxford, where teachers noted his fierce competitive spirit and occasional disregard for rules he considered unnecessary. In 1928, at age 18, Bader joined the Royal Air Force College Cranwell as a flight cadet. Flying came naturally to him. Instructors described him as gifted but overconfident, a pilot who pushed boundaries and took risks that made senior officers nervous. He graduated in 1930 and was posted to No. 23 Squadron, flying Gloucester Gamecock biplane fighters. By 1931, Bader had established himself as one of the RAF's most talented young pilots. He was known for low-level aerobatics, a dangerous practice that thrilled spectators but violated standing regulations. Squadron commanders warned him repeatedly. Bader ignored them. On December 14, 1931, everything changed. Bader was visiting the Reading Aero Club at Woodley Aerodrome in Berkshire with 2 fellow RAF pilots. After lunch, they decided to perform some aerobatics to impress their hosts. Bader took off in a Bristol Bulldog Mark II-A biplane, serial number K1676. He climbed to about 500 feet and began a series of rolls. Witnesses on the ground reported that during one particularly low roll, Bader's left wingtip struck the ground. The aircraft cartwheeled violently across the grass at over 100 miles per hour, disintegrating as it tumbled. Bader was thrown from the wreckage, conscious but catastrophically injured. An ambulance rushed him to Royal Berkshire Hospital in Reading. Doctors found that his right leg had been crushed beyond repair, nearly severed above the knee. There was no choice. They amputated his right leg above the knee that same day. But the nightmare wasn't over. Infection set in rapidly. Bader developed septicemia. His left leg, damaged but initially salvageable, began to die. On December 18th, 4 days after the crash, surgeons amputated his left leg below the knee. Hospital records from the Royal Berkshire Hospital, now preserved at the RAF Museum in London, show that doctors gave Bader less than a 50% chance of survival. He was 21 years old, lying in a hospital bed with both legs gone and his flying career seemingly over forever. Most men would have surrendered to despair. Douglas Bader became angry, not at himself, but at the idea that his life was finished. During the 6 months he spent recovering, first in the hospital and then at the RAF Invalid Depot in Uxbridge, Bader was fitted with aluminum alloy prosthetic legs manufactured by the De Sutter brothers, a British company that had been making artificial limbs since World War I. The prosthetics were primitive by modern standards. The right prosthetic leg, replacing everything above the knee, weighed about 10 pounds and attached to his stump with a leather socket and straps. The left leg, replacing everything below the knee, was slightly lighter but equally cumbersome. Both legs had articulated joints that locked when standing and had to be manually unlocked to sit. Learning to walk with these devices required extraordinary core strength and balance. Physical therapy records from Roehampton Hospital document Bader's progress. Within 3 weeks, he was walking with crutches. Within 6 weeks, he discarded the crutches and walked with canes. Within 3 months, he was walking unassisted, though his gait was stiff and awkward. His therapists were astonished. One noted in his file that Baader approached physical therapy with the same aggressive determination he had shown in flying, treating every exercise as a competition he intended to win. But Baader wasn't satisfied with just walking. He wanted his life back. He learned to drive a car, modifying the pedals so he could operate them with his prosthetics. He learned to play golf, adapting his swing to compensate for his rigid legs. He even learned to dance, though his wife later admitted it was more like controlled falling, and most importantly, he demanded to fly again. In 1932, just 6 months after losing both legs, Baader convinced his doctors to certify him fit enough for a flight test. RAF officials at the Central Flying School in Wittering were skeptical but agreed to let him try. On a cold morning in April 1932, Douglas Baader climbed into the cockpit of an Avro 504 biplane trainer. Ground crew had to lift him into the seat. Once inside, Baader strapped in and fired up the engine. Instructors watched nervously as he taxied to the runway, advanced the throttle and lifted off. For the next 30 minutes, Baader put the Avro through its paces. He performed loops, rolls, stall turns and spins. He flew inverted. He performed a perfect 3-point landing. When he climbed out of the cockpit, he was grinning. The instructors were speechless. One later wrote in his report that Baader flew better than many able-bodied pilots and showed no impairment whatsoever. But the RAF Medical Board didn't care. Despite Baader's demonstration, despite his instructors' reports, despite everything, they declared him permanently unfit for flying duties. Regulation AP 3235, Medical Fitness Standards, explicitly stated that pilots must have full use of all limbs. The board invalidated him out of the service with a disability pension of £200 per year. Douglas Baader, one of the RAF's most talented pilots, was grounded not because he couldn't fly, but because regulations said men without legs couldn't be pilots. Baader was devastated. For the next 7 years, he worked for the Asiatic Petroleum Company, later known as Shell Oil, as an aviation fuel specialist. He traveled across Britain, visiting airfields and selling fuel to commercial aviation companies. It was respectable work, but every day he watched other men fly planes he knew he could pilot better. He wrote letter after letter to the Air Ministry, requesting reinstatement. Every letter was denied. The rejection letters all cited the same regulation. Pilots must have full use of all limbs. By 1939, Baader had nearly given up hope. Then Adolf Hitler invaded Poland. On September 1, 1939, Nazi Germany launched a massive assault across the Polish border. Britain and France had guaranteed Poland's sovereignty. On September 3, 1939, Britain declared war on Germany. Suddenly, the RAF faced a desperate situation. They needed pilots, experienced pilots, combat-trained pilots, pilots like Douglas Baader. On October 18, 1939, Baader received a telegram from the Air Ministry. It requested his immediate attendance at a medical board review in London. Baader travelled to the RAF Central Medical Establishment on October 20th. Doctors examined him thoroughly. They tested his reflexes, his balance, his coordination. They reviewed his 1932 flight test records. The board members debated for hours. Finally, on November 27, 1939, Douglas Baader received official notification. He was reinstated into the Royal Air Force with the rank of flying officer, effective immediately. He was 29 years old and had waited 8 years for this moment. Baader reported to No. 19 Squadron at RAF Duxford in Cambridgeshire in February 1940. The squadron flew Supermarine Spitfire Mark I fighters, the RAF's newest and most advanced aircraft. The Spitfire was a masterpiece of engineering. Powered by a Rolls-Royce Merlin engine producing 1,030 horsepower, it could reach speeds of 362 miles per hour and climb to 30,000 feet. Armed with 8 Browning .303 caliber machine guns, 4 in each wing, the Spitfire could fire 1,260 rounds per minute. But it was also demanding to fly. The cockpit was cramped. The controls were sensitive, and most importantly, it required precise rudder pedal control to maintain coordinated flight, especially during high-speed turns and aerobatic maneuvers. For most pilots, this wasn't a problem. For Baader, it presented a unique challenge. He couldn't feel the rudder pedals under his prosthetic feet. Most pilots flew by feel, sensing how much pressure to apply through their legs and feet. Baader had to fly purely by sight, watching the ball in the turn and bank indicator and the movement of the aircraft, compensating entirely through visual cues. Engineers at Duxford worked with Baader to modify his cockpit. They extended the rudder pedals slightly and added extra padding to help him maintain consistent pressure. Baader practiced relentlessly, flying sortie after sortie, relearning muscle memory that no longer existed. Within weeks, he had mastered the Spitfire. Flight logs show he completed advanced aerobatic exercises that pushed the aircraft to its structural limits. His squadron mates, initially doubtful whether a man with artificial legs could handle combat flying, watched in amazement as Baader threw his Spitfire through maneuvers most pilots wouldn't attempt. But Baader had discovered something remarkable. His prosthetic legs actually gave him an advantage in one critical area: high G-force maneuvers. When a fighter pilot pulls a tight turn at high speed, the G-forces push blood downward, away from the brain and toward the legs. At 4 or 5 Gs, pilots experience grey-out, a loss of peripheral vision. At 6 or 7 Gs, many pilots black out completely as their brain is starved of oxygen. Pilots develop techniques to fight this, tensing their leg muscles and performing breathing exercises to keep blood in their upper body. But Baader didn't have legs to pool blood in. His prosthetics acted like natural G-suits, preventing blood from leaving his torso. Medical officers at Duxford documented that Baader could sustain turns at 7 Gs without any vision impairment, giving him a significant advantage in dogfights where the tightest turn often meant the difference between shooting and being shot. In May 1940, Nazi Germany launched Fall Gelb, the invasion of France and the Low Countries. The Wehrmacht smashed through the Ardennes forest, bypassing the Maginot Line and trapping Allied forces in Belgium. The British Expeditionary Force retreated toward the port of Dunkirk, and the RAF was thrown into desperate combat to cover the evacuation. On June 1, 1940, Douglas Baader flew his first combat mission. He was assigned to escort Bristol Blenheim bombers attacking German positions near Dunkirk. Intelligence briefings warned that the Luftwaffe had overwhelming numerical superiority. German fighters outnumbered British fighters by more than 3 to 1 over the Channel. Baader's section of 4 Spitfires climbed to 15,000 feet over the French coast. Below them, the beaches of Dunkirk were choked with thousands of British and French soldiers waiting for evacuation. German artillery pounded the beaches, Luftwaffe bombers circled like vultures. Then Baader's radio crackled. Bandits, 12 o'clock high, a formation of Messerschmitt 109 fighters, was diving toward the bombers from above. Baader didn't hesitate. He pushed his throttle forward, rolled inverted and pulled into a steep dive, accelerating toward the enemy formation. The Messerschmitt 109E was a formidable opponent. Powered by a Daimler-Benz engine producing 1,175 horsepower, it was slightly faster than the Spitfire in a dive and had superior high-altitude performance. It was armed with two 20mm cannons and 2 machine guns. German pilots were experienced, many having fought in the Spanish Civil War. But Baader had one advantage the Germans didn't expect. He was absolutely fearless. Baader closed to within 200 yards of a Messerschmitt 109 that was lining up a shot on a crippled bomber. At that range, deflection shooting wasn't necessary. He simply centered the German fighter in his gun sight and pressed the firing button. All 8 of his Browning machine guns erupted simultaneously, sending a storm of .303 caliber rounds downrange at 1,260 rounds per minute. Tracer rounds lit up the sky. Baader held the trigger for 3 seconds, expending nearly 300 rounds. The Messerschmitt's engine exploded in a spray of coolant and oil. Black smoke poured from the cowling. The German pilot bailed out, and the 109 spiraled into the English Channel. Douglas Baader had scored his first confirmed kill. He was 30 years old, flying with artificial legs, and he had just shot down one of Germany's finest fighters. But there was no time to celebrate. 2 more Messerschmitts were diving on his position. Bader broke hard right, pulling 6 Gs in a tight turn. His vision narrowed slightly but remained clear. The German pilots, experiencing full G-force effects, couldn't match his turn radius. Bader reversed, rolled, and came out behind one of the Messerschmitts. He fired again. This time, his bullet struck the 109's tail section. The German fighter pulled up sharply and disappeared into a cloud bank, trailing smoke. Bader claimed it as a probable but never saw it crash. Over the next 3 weeks, as the Dunkirk evacuation continued, Bader flew mission after mission. He shot down 2 more confirmed German aircraft, a Messerschmitt 110 twin-engine fighter and a Heinkel 111 bomber. By late June, when France surrendered and the Battle of Britain was about to begin, Bader had proven himself in combat. On July 11, 1940, he was promoted to flight lieutenant and posted to No. 2, 42 Squadron at RAF Colditz in Norfolk. No. 2, 42 Squadron was a Canadian unit that had suffered devastating losses during the Battle of France. They had lost half their pilots and most of their aircraft. Morale was shattered. Many of the surviving pilots were convinced they were going to die. Bader took one look at them and decided to rebuild the squadron from the ground up. He demanded new aircraft. He drilled his pilots relentlessly. He led practice dogfights where he played the enemy, attacking his own pilots to teach them aggressive tactics. Within weeks, 242 Squadron was transformed. They believed in themselves again. More importantly, they believed in Bader. On August 30, 1940, the Luftwaffe launched one of the largest daylight raids of the Battle of Britain. More than 100 German bombers, escorted by 80 fighters, crossed the English coast, targeting airfields in Essex and Kent. Air raid sirens wailed across southeastern England. RAF Fighter Command scrambled every available squadron. At Colditz, 242 Squadron received the order. Scramble, Angels 20. Bader and his 12 Spitfires roared into the sky. They climbed through scattered clouds, engines screaming at full throttle. At 20,000 feet, Bader spotted the enemy formation. The sight was terrifying. German bombers filled the sky in tight formations, with Messerschmitt fighters weaving above them. It looked like an aerial armada. Bader's radio operator called in the sighting. There are hundreds of them. Bader's response became legendary. Good. Then we can't miss. He led his squadron in a head-on attack, diving directly toward the bomber formation at over 400 miles per hour. German gunners opened fire with dozens of machine guns, filling the air with tracers. Bader didn't flinch. He selected a Messerschmitt 110 twin-engine fighter that was escorting the bombers. The 110-0 was slower and less maneuverable than a 109, but heavily armed with cannons and machine guns. Bader closed to 150 yards and opened fire. His bullets tore through the 110's cockpit and right engine. The fighter exploded in mid-air. Bader flew through the debris cloud and immediately engaged a second Messerschmitt 110. He fired another burst. The 110's left engine erupted in flames. The aircraft rolled over and went down. The battle lasted less than 10 minutes, but it felt like hours. When it was over, 242 Squadron had claimed 9 confirmed kills and 4 probables without losing a single pilot. Bader's tactics, attacking aggressively and refusing to disengage, had worked brilliantly. He was awarded the Distinguished Flying Cross. More importantly, he had proven that the Luftwaffe could be beaten. Throughout the autumn and winter of 1940, Bader continued to rack up victories. By March 1941, he was promoted to squadron leader and given command of the Tangmere Wing in West Sussex, one of the RAF's most prestigious postings. The Tangmere Wing consisted of 3 Spitfire squadrons: 145 Squadron, 610 Squadron, and 616 Squadron. Bader now commanded over 40 pilots and more than 50 aircraft. He was 31 years old, one of the youngest wing commanders in fighter command, and he was flying without legs. Bader developed innovative tactics for his wing. He advocated for the big wing formation, assembling multiple squadrons into a single massive strike force of 30 or more fighters. The idea was to overwhelm German formations with sheer numbers. Air Vice Marshal Trafford Lee Mallory, commander of 12 Group, supported Bader's approach, but other senior officers, including Air Vice Marshal Keith Park, commander of 11 Group, argued that big wings took too long to assemble and couldn't respond quickly to raids. The tactical debate divided fighter command and continued throughout the war. But Bader's results spoke for themselves. His wing consistently achieved the highest kill ratios in fighter command. In June 1941, fighter command shifted from defensive operations to offensive fighter sweeps over occupied France. The goal was to draw the Luftwaffe into combat and destroy German fighters before they could threaten Britain again. These missions were called rhubarbs and circuses. Bader led dozens of them, flying deep into enemy territory to attack German airfields, railways and supply columns. The missions were incredibly dangerous. German anti-aircraft fire was intense, and Messerschmitt 109 squadrons defended their territory aggressively. On June 21, 1941, Bader led the Tangmere Wing on a fighter sweep over northern France near Le Touquet. His formation consisted of 36 Spitfires, flying in stepped formations at altitudes ranging from 15,000 to 25,000 feet. Near the French coast, they encountered a group of Messerschmitt 109s from Jagdgeschwader 26, one of the Luftwaffe's most elite units. The German fighters attacked from above, diving out of the sun. The dogfight was chaotic and violent. Aircraft twisted and turned in tight spirals, engines screaming, machine guns hammering. Bader locked onto a Messerschmitt 109 and fired a long burst. The 109's canopy shattered. The aircraft rolled inverted and dove toward the ground. Bader didn't watch it crash. He was already engaging another target. He fired again. Another Messerschmitt broke off trailing smoke. 2 confirmed kills in less than 2 minutes. His total was now 20 confirmed victories. He was one of the RAF's top aces. But Douglas Bader's luck was about to run out. On August 9, 1941, he led another fighter sweep over France. The mission briefing indicated light enemy activity. Intelligence was wrong. As the Tangmere Wing crossed the coast near Le Touquet, they were ambushed by 2 groups of Messerschmitt 109s, over 30 fighters. The Germans had been waiting. The battle erupted at 24,000 feet. Bader engaged multiple targets, firing at a Messerschmitt and watching it spiral away damaged. Then something went wrong. Accounts differ on exactly what happened. Some pilots reported seeing Bader's Spitfire struck by cannon fire from a 109 flown by Oberleutnant Gerhard Schöpfel, a German ace with over 40 kills. Other witnesses claimed Bader collided with another Spitfire during a violent evasive maneuver. A third theory suggests his aircraft was hit by debris from another aircraft exploding nearby. What is certain is that Bader's Spitfire suffered catastrophic structural failure. The entire tail section, including the rudder and elevators, separated from the fuselage. The aircraft became uncontrollable, tumbling violently through the air. Bader tried to regain control, but it was hopeless. He had no choice. Bail out. He jettisoned the canopy and tried to climb out. But his right prosthetic leg was trapped. The leg was wedged against the control stick or caught in the seat harness. Accounts vary. Bader pulled desperately, but the leg wouldn't come free. He was trapped in a disintegrating aircraft, plummeting toward Earth at terminal velocity. In desperation, Bader released the straps holding his prosthetic leg and tore himself free, leaving the artificial limb behind in the cockpit. He tumbled out into the slipstream at 24,000 feet. His parachute deployed at approximately 4,000 feet. Bader floated down with only one prosthetic leg, the left one, still attached. He landed hard in a wheat field near Saint-Omer in occupied France. French farmers reached him first and tried to hide him, but German soldiers arrived within minutes. Bader was now a prisoner of war. When the German soldiers removed his flight suit and discovered he had only one leg, and that the other was a prosthetic, they were stunned. Word spread rapidly through the local Wehrmacht garrison. The aggressive RAF pilot who had just been shot down was missing both legs. Within days, the story reached the Luftwaffe High Command. General Lieutenant Adolf Galland, one of Germany's top fighter aces with over 100 confirmed kills, personally visited Bader. Galland later wrote in his memoir that he couldn't believe what he was seeing. The pilot who had led the aggressive Tangmere Wing, the commander who had caused so much trouble for the Luftwaffe over France, was a double amputee. Galland was so impressed that he ordered his own mechanics to search the wreckage of Bader's Spitfire to recover his prosthetic leg. When they couldn't find it intact, Galland did something extraordinary. He contacted the RAF through the International Red Cross and proposed a temporary ceasefire to allow the British to airdrop a replacement prosthetic leg. The request went all the way up to Winston Churchill. Churchill approved it. On August 19, 1941, an RAF Armstrong Whitworth Whitley bomber flew over St. Omer and dropped a package containing a new artificial leg for Douglas Bader. The package was attached to a parachute and landed within German lines. It remains one of the most remarkable gestures of respect between enemies in military history. Galland even allowed Bader to sit in the cockpit of a Messerschmitt 109 while at the airfield, though he wisely refused to let him actually fly it. But Bader had no intention of sitting quietly as a prisoner. Within 48 hours of receiving his new leg, he attempted to escape from the hospital where he was being held. He fashioned a rope from knotted bedsheets, opened a window, and tried to climb down 3 stories. A German sentry spotted him halfway down. Bader was recaptured and transferred to a more secure facility. The Germans quickly realized they had a problem. Most prisoners of war accepted captivity and settled into camp routine. Bader refused to accept anything. Within weeks, he attempted another escape, then another, and another. The Germans transferred him to Stalag Luft 3, a high-security POW camp in Silesia specifically designed for captured Allied airmen. Stalag Luft 3 was infamous. It was the site of the Great Escape in 1944, where 76 Allied officers tunneled out of the camp, though 50 were subsequently murdered by the Gestapo. Bader arrived at Stalag Luft 3 in late 1941 and immediately began planning escapes. He participated in multiple tunnel projects. He forged identity papers. He hoarded supplies. Camp records show he attempted at least 4 escape attempts at Stalag Luft 3. The German camp commandant, Oberst Friedrich Wilhelm von Lindeiner, finally confronted Bader directly. "If you attempt one more escape, I will confiscate your artificial legs." Bader's response was to immediately begin planning another escape. Von Lindeiner made good on his threat. He ordered Bader's prosthetics confiscated and locked in the commandant's office. Bader spent 2 weeks hobbling around camp on crutches before other prisoners staged a protest. The Red Cross intervened. The prosthetics were returned, but Bader was placed under constant surveillance. In August 1942, the Germans had had enough. Bader was transferred to Colditz Castle, a medieval fortress in Saxony that served as the Nazis' highest security POW camp. Colditz was reserved for Deutschfeindliche, incorrigible prisoners who had repeatedly attempted to escape from other camps. The castle sat atop a cliff, surrounded by sheer rock walls. Guard towers covered every approach. German officers believed Colditz was escape-proof. Bader arrived at Colditz in August 1942 and found himself among the Allies' most determined escapees. British, French, Dutch, and Polish officers filled the castle, all of them expert tunnelers, forgers, and escape artists. Bader fit right in. For the next 3 years, he participated in numerous escape attempts. He helped dig tunnels. He created diversions to distract guards. He forged documents. None of his attempts succeeded, but he never stopped trying. Fellow prisoners later recalled that Bader was a difficult man to live with. He was arrogant, abrasive, and often argued with senior officers. But they also remembered his absolute refusal to accept defeat. Even when locked in a medieval castle surrounded by guards, Bader never believed he was truly captured. He spent 4 years making the Germans' lives as difficult as possible. On April 15, 1945, the U.S. Army's 9th Armored Division liberated Colditz Castle. Bader had been a prisoner for 3 years and 8 months. He returned to Britain a national hero. He was credited with 22 confirmed aerial victories, 6 probable, and 11 damaged enemy aircraft. He had been awarded the Distinguished Service Order and Bar, the Distinguished Flying Cross and Bar, the French Croix de Guerre, and the French Legion of Honor. In 1956, he was appointed Commander of the Order of the British Empire. In 1976, Queen Elizabeth II knighted him. He became Sir Douglas Bader. After the war, Bader joined Shell Aircraft as managing director. He became a passionate advocate for disabled veterans, proving through his own example that physical disability was no barrier to achievement. He spoke at schools, gave speeches, and worked tirelessly to change public perceptions of disability. In 1954, his biography, Reach for the Sky by Paul Brickhill, became an international bestseller and was later adapted into a film starring Kenneth More. Bader consulted on the film and even performed some of the flying sequences himself at age 45. Bader continued flying for decades after the war. He piloted airshow demonstrations across Europe and the United States, proving that the same determination that made him a fighter ace still burned. He flew Spitfires, Hurricanes, and even modern jets. In 1979, at age 69, he flew a Spitfire in a commemorative Battle of Britain flypast over London. It was his final flight in the aircraft that had made him famous. Douglas Bader passed away on September 5, 1982, at the age of 72, after suffering a heart attack while driving home from a dinner in London. Thousands attended his funeral at St. Clement Danes Church, the RAF's official church. His prosthetic legs, the same ones he wore during the Battle of Britain, are now displayed at the Royal Air Force Museum in Hendon, London, a testament to one man's refusal to accept limitations. The Luftwaffe pilots who faced Douglas Bader in combat during the Battle of Britain and over occupied France never knew the man shooting them down was flying without legs. German intelligence files captured after the war contain detailed dossiers on RAF aces, listing their tactics, aircraft preferences, and combat records. But Bader's disability was completely unknown to German intelligence until after his capture in August 1941. Even then, Luftwaffe commanders struggled to comprehend it. General Lieutenant Adolf Galland wrote in his memoir that had he known during their battles over the Channel that Bader was flying without legs, he would have found it utterly incomprehensible that such a man could not only fly a high-performance fighter, but could dominate in combat. After the war, Galland and Bader became friends. They attended air shows together and gave joint interviews. Galland always maintained that Bader was one of the finest fighter pilots he had ever encountered, enemy or otherwise. In one interview in the 1970s, Galland was asked if he thought Bader's prosthetic legs gave him any advantage. Galland paused, then said, "His legs gave him nothing. What made him dangerous was here, and he pointed to his head, and here, and he pointed to his heart. He never gave up. Never. That is what made him an ace." Douglas Bader's story is not just about overcoming physical disability, though that would be achievement enough. It is about refusing to let others define your limits. When the RAF told him he could never fly again, he proved them wrong. When doctors said he'd never walk normally again, he danced. When the Luftwaffe tried to shoot him down, he shot them down first. When the Germans locked him in a castle, he spent 4 years trying to escape. And after the war, when people suggested he should retire quietly, he flew air shows into his 70s. Bader's legacy is not measured in the 22 aircraft he destroyed or the medals he received. It is measured in the belief that willpower, determination, and absolute refusal to quit can overcome any obstacle. He lived in a time when society viewed disability as disqualification. He rejected that entirely. He didn't want sympathy or accommodation. He wanted to compete on equal terms and prove he could excel. The Luftwaffe couldn't believe the legless RAF ace with 22 kills existed. German pilots couldn't comprehend how a man without legs could fly a Spitfire, much less dominate in combat. But Douglas Bader didn't need them to believe. He didn't need their understanding or their approval. He just needed his Spitfire, his determination, and the sky. And with those 3 things, he proved that human limits exist only in the mind, not in the body.